What if the boats that could shut down one of the busiest waterways on Earth are sitting right now inside a mountain waiting for one order to move? And what if the American military has already spent months trying to dig them out without fully succeeding? Before I show you what's actually happening, do 3 quick things. Hit like, because it genuinely helps this video reach more people. Subscribe because this story is still unfolding and you don't want to miss the next chapter. And send this to someone who still thinks this war ended months ago, because it didn't. Let's rewind first, because if you don't understand how we got here, the rest of this story won't make sense. Back in late February this year, the United States and Israel launched a massive surprise strike against Iran. It wasn't a warning shot. It wasn't a limited operation. Iran's supreme leader was killed in that opening attack, along with several top military commanders. In one night, the entire balance of power in the Middle East shifted. Iran called it an act of war. The United States and Israel called it a necessary strike to stop a much bigger danger before it could happen. Whatever you call it, the result was the same. Within hours, missiles were flying. Within days, this had become the largest open conflict the region had seen in decades. Iran responded the only way it could. It fired missiles and drones at Israel, at American bases across the Gulf, and at countries that were helping the U.S. military operate in the region. And then it did something that hurt the entire world economy at once. It shut down the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow stretch of water where roughly 1 out of every 5 barrels of oil on the planet has to pass through. Now here's where most people lost the thread of this story. In the opening weeks of the war, American and Israeli air power tore through Iran's visible navy. Ports were hit, naval bases were hit, ships were sunk before they ever left the harbor. If you looked at satellite photos from March, you would have assumed Iran's ability to fight at sea was finished. It wasn't. And understanding why is the whole point of this video. Iran has known for decades that it can never build a navy capable of matching the United States in open battle. No amount of money buys you enough destroyers and aircraft carriers to compete with American sea power. Iranian military planners accepted that reality a long time ago, and instead of trying to win a fight they couldn't win, they built something completely different. Thousands of small, fast attack boats, some barely bigger than a fishing vessel, cheap to build, cheap to lose, and almost impossible to fully wipe out because there are simply so many of them scattered across the coastline. But the boats themselves are only half the story. The other half is where Iran chose to hide them. Along the rocky southern coast and on a handful of islands sitting directly inside the Strait of Hormuz, Iran spent years carving out shelters inside solid rock. Real hidden harbors, built into mountains and cliffs, where these fast boats can sit protected from airstrikes, refuel, rearm, and then launch again within minutes, from a satellite, from a warship's radar, from a fighter jet flying overhead. It just looks like empty coastline, cliffs, rock, nothing worth targeting. And then, without warning, a hidden opening appears and a swarm of small boats pours out toward the shipping lanes before anyone has time to react. This is exactly why, months after the U.S. destroyed most of Iran's visible fleet, American officials were still describing Iranian fast boats as an active, serious threat. The ships you could see from space were never the real problem. The ones tucked inside the mountain always were. So let's talk about what's actually happened in the weeks since, because this is where the real story picks up. And I want to walk you through it carefully, because there's a big difference between what's confirmed and what people online are exaggerating for clicks. In early July, after Iranian forces attacked several commercial ships near Oman, the United States responded with one of the largest strike waves of the entire war. According to public statements from U.S. Central Command, American forces hit more than 80 separate targets across southern Iran in a single operation. Air defense systems, command centers, coastal radar stations, missile sites aimed at ships. And according to the military's own numbers, dozens of Revolutionary Guard fast attack boats, many of them destroyed in or near the exact islands and coastal towns that analysts have pointed to for years as the heart of Iran's hidden boat network. Qeshm Island, Bandar Abbas, a small coastal town called Sirik. These aren't random locations. These are the places where Iran built its underground boat shelters in the first place. And that strike wasn't a one-time event. Through the middle of July, the U.S. carried out repeated waves of strikes, each one described publicly as larger than the last. At one point, a single American official told reporters that a mid-July operation was 4 to 5 times bigger in scope than the strike that came just before it. Iranian state media reported explosions on Qeshm Island and on Qeshm Island, another location long tied to Iran's coastal military presence. Iran's own state news agency reported multiple explosions in a single night at Sirik alone. On the American side, Central Command confirmed it was deliberately targeting coastal surveillance systems, missile storage sites, and what officials called maritime strike capability, specifically to reduce Iran's ability to threaten ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, and it didn't stop there. Later in the summer, after Iran attempted new strikes against American forces in the region, the United States responded again, this time hitting command centers, missile and drone facilities, coastal surveillance sites, and once more, what officials described as maritime capabilities. Explosions were reported across an unusually wide stretch of coastline. Bushehr, Qeshm Island, Avaz, Qeshm Island again. One American official described the scale of that particular night's bombing as roughly double the strike that had come before it. So if you're sitting there thinking, wait, didn't they already destroy most of Iran's navy back in the spring? You're not wrong to be confused. That confusion is exactly why this story deserves more than a 5-second headline. The big visible warships were mostly dealt with early in the war. What has dragged on for months since, strike after strike, is a much harder problem. Reaching boats that were never sitting in open water to begin with, but hidden deep inside carved-out rock, protected by reinforced entrances, and in many cases more than one way in or out, built specifically to survive exactly the kind of sustained bombing campaign that has now been running against them for months. If this kind of deep, honest breakdown is why you keep coming back to channels like this one, do me a favor and tap that subscribe button right now, and turn on notifications too. This war is still moving, and I don't want you finding out about the next development from some rushed 30-second clip with no context. So why has it been so incredibly hard for even the most powerful military on Earth to fully knock this out? Because understanding this single question will change how you read every future headline about this war. Picture solid rock, sometimes hundreds of meters thick, standing between a bomb and its target. That's not a wall that collapses the way a building does when it's hit. That's natural stone shaped by the planet itself over millions of years. No amount of modern engineering makes punching through that simple or fast. To actually destroy a shelter like this, you need specialized bunker-busting weapons designed to bury deep into the ground before detonating. You need extremely precise intelligence on exactly where the internal chambers sit, because if you only crater the entrance and leave the inside untouched, the boats are still sitting there completely safe, ready to roll back out the moment repairs are made. And even then, if a base was built with more than one entrance, which many of these were designed to have from the start, sealing one doorway doesn't finish the job. It might just mean the boats leave through a different opening a few days later. This is the entire logic behind why Iran chose to build these shelters inside mountains instead of simple boat sheds along the beach. A boat shed gets flattened in a single pass. A mountain doesn't. Iran's military planners understood something important. A bombing campaign against hardened, hidden, spread-out infrastructure like this becomes slow, expensive, and deeply frustrating for whoever is trying to shut it down, even when that side has total control of the skies. And that is exactly what's been playing out for months. Strike after strike, week after week, against a threat that keeps surviving simply because of where it chose to hide. There's a specific tactic that makes these boats especially dangerous the moment they do come out, and it's worth understanding because it explains why the US and its allies take this threat so seriously, even though we're talking about individually small, cheap vessels compared to a full-sized warship. It's called swarming. Instead of a single boat trying to fight a warship head-on, which it would lose badly, dozens of small boats launch at the same time from scattered hidden locations and converge on one target from multiple directions at once. Some carry missiles, some carry torpedoes. The goal was never to win a fair fight. The goal is to overwhelm a ship's defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictability, attacking from angles a crew simply cannot watch all at once. There's real footage from years before this war even began, showing Iranian fast boats rehearsing this exact formation near a US warship, closing in from several directions while radio warnings went out in the background. This isn't some theoretical scenario dreamed up by analysts. It's a tactic Iran has been practicing for a very long time. Now, I want to be completely honest with you here, because a lot of coverage circulating online right now is stretching the facts further than they actually go, and I'd rather you hear the accurate version from me than get excited about a headline that doesn't hold up. What is confirmed, based on official statements and multiple independent news outlets, is that the United States has repeatedly and heavily struck the military infrastructure surrounding these coastal hideouts. Missile sites, radar and command centers, boats caught out in the open on the surface, dozens of confirmed fast attack craft destroyed across multiple waves of strikes. What has not been confirmed anywhere, not by American military statements, not by any serious independent reporting, is a specific claim that these hardened tunnel systems themselves have actually been breached or collapsed. The rock shelters where the boats sleep deep inside the mountain remain, as far as the public record shows, still standing. That distinction matters a lot. Hammering the coastline and the infrastructure surrounding these hideouts is very real, and it's well documented. Claiming the underground bunkers themselves have been cracked wide open is a much bigger claim, and right now, that's not something the evidence actually supports. If you see anyone stating that with total confidence online, treat it with healthy skepticism until it's backed by more than one credible source. There's also a human side to this story that's easy to lose sight of when you're just watching strike footage and reading numbers off a screen. This isn't happening in some empty, isolated military zone far from ordinary life. These coastal regions have towns. They have workers. They have families who live nearby and have nothing to do with any of this. Reports coming out of Iran describe civilian casualties from these waves of strikes, including people with no connection whatsoever to military operations. That doesn't erase the military significance of these targets. It just means this isn't purely a story about hardware and strategy, and it shouldn't be treated like one. Let's zoom out for a moment, because there's a bigger piece of this puzzle that a lot of coverage completely skips over. Strikes are only one half of the pressure being applied to Iran right now. The other half is a naval blockade. And honestly, in the long run, it might matter even more than any single bombing run. The United States reimposed a full naval blockade on Iranian ports earlier this year, after an earlier ceasefire and round of negotiations broke down. Since then, the economic toll has been severe. Officials have described losses running into hundreds of millions of dollars a day, hitting an economy that was already strained after years of sanctions before this war even started. Dozens of vessels have been intercepted, some have been seized outright, and yes, a number of ships have still managed to slip through, because no blockade in history has ever been completely airtight. But the overall pressure is constant, and it isn't letting up. So picture the full situation Iran is facing right now. Direct military strikes hammering its coastline and its hidden boat network on one side. A massive economic chokehold slowly draining its resources on the other. Two pressure campaigns running at the same time, clearly aimed at the same outcome, ending Iran's ability to threaten one of the most important waterways on the planet. And here's the part that makes this story genuinely more interesting than a simple story of who's winning and who's losing. Destroying most of Iran's visible navy back in the opening weeks of the war did not stop Iran from continuing to threaten the Strait of Hormuz afterward. Analysts who've followed this conflict closely have pointed out something important. Iran's large conventional warships were never really the core of this threat to begin with. The real disruptive power was always sitting inside those hidden coastal shelters, in boats too small and too well hidden to easily wipe out from the air, which means sinking the expensive, visible warships months ago, as dramatic as that looked on camera, barely touched the actual capability that has kept this fight going ever since. If you've made it this far, drop a single word in the comments right now, type coastline. I want to see how many of you are actually following this whole story instead of skimming to the end, and honestly, I read every single comment. There's one more layer worth understanding here, because it ties directly into everything we've just walked through. Iran hasn't only been protecting fast boats inside these coastal shelters. There's also serious mine-laying capability tied into the same network of bases, and mines are a genuinely underrated threat in naval warfare. Unlike a missile, a mine doesn't need a crew standing by, and it doesn't need constant guidance. It can sit quietly on the seafloor or just beneath the surface of a shipping lane for weeks, waiting for the wrong ship to pass over it. Clearing mines safely is slow, careful, and dangerous work. And it becomes even more dangerous when the waters you're trying to clear are still defended by hidden fast boats capable of swarming in from multiple directions at once. Even in a scenario where the fighting stopped completely tomorrow, that threat wouldn't just disappear. It would take real time, real risk, and real resources to fully clear those waters and make them safe again. So where does all of this actually leave us right now, in the middle of August, with negotiations reportedly underway again through Oman, and American officials publicly saying they want this war to wind down soon? If you strip away the dramatic headlines and just look at what's confirmed, here's the honest picture. Iran spent close to 2 decades building a defensive system specifically designed to survive exactly the kind of overwhelming air campaign it's been facing since February. Hidden fast boats, tucked inside hardened coastal caves. A layered strategy built entirely around one idea, that you don't need to win a fair fight against a far bigger military. You just need to make sure that military can never fully finish the job. And after months of one of the most intense bombing campaigns this region has seen in a generation, with dozens of confirmed strikes hitting the coastline around these hideouts again and again, that system is still functioning. Not untouched, not unscathed, genuinely damaged, with confirmed destruction of dozens of boats and major supporting infrastructure. But not eliminated either. That's not a clean, satisfying ending, and I know that. There's no single dramatic moment here where someone can point at a screen and say, that's it, it's over, one side has clearly won. What we're actually watching is something slower and honestly something far more realistic in how modern conflicts like this tend to actually play out. Sustained pressure against infrastructure that was deliberately built to be incredibly hard to fully destroy. And if history is any guide, wars shaped like this one rarely end with a single perfect knockout strike. They tend to wind down gradually through some combination of military exhaustion, economic pressure, and quiet diplomatic movement happening behind the scenes while the strikes keep making the headlines out front. And maybe that's the deeper lesson buried inside this entire story. It was never really about boats or caves or bombs at all. Not at its core. It's about what happens when a smaller power refuses to fight the fight everyone expects it to fight, and instead builds something patient, something hidden, something designed to outlast the headlines rather than win one dramatic battle. Whether you see that strategy as impressive engineering under pressure or something far darker, probably depends entirely on which side of this war you're watching it from. But either way, understanding it is the real difference between actually knowing what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now and just reacting to whatever title happens to be trending today. I'll keep tracking this story closely because it isn't finished. Not even close. The moment something new and properly confirmed comes out, whether that's coastal bunkers finally breached or a real diplomatic breakthrough that actually holds, I'll bring it to you straight, sourced properly, without the exaggeration. If you want to be here when that update drops, subscribe now so you don't miss it. Until then, stay sharp and stay skeptical of anyone online promising you an instant, total victory in a war that has already proven it doesn't work that way.